Chapter 1. The Law of Energy Transfer. The profound meaning of alchemy is simply all composition, implying the relationship of the whole of creation to its constituent parts. Thus, alchemy, when properly understood, refers to the conscious power that controls mutations and transmutations within matter and energy, and even within life itself. It is the science of the mystic, and is the forte of the self-developed man who, having searched, comes to realize his oneness with God and is willing to play his part. Saint Germain. 2,000 years ago, when Christ walked upon the waters of the Sea of Galilee, he demonstrated a manifestation of the natural law of levitation operating within an energetic framework of cohesion, adhesion, and magnetism, the very principles that make orbital flight possible. The atoms of light that composed Christ's body absorbed, by force of will, an additional quantity of cosmic rays and spiritual substance, whose kinship with physical light transformed his whole body into light, thereby enabling him to walk upon the sea as if it were solid ground. His body was purely a ray of light, shining upon the waters. The most dazzling concept of all was his ability to transfer to Peter this authority over energy through the power of the vision that Peter himself had of the Christ in radiant and illuminated manifestation. However, when for an instant Peter took his eyes off the Christ, a vibration and a vortex of human fear seized him, which immediately densified his body, causing it to sink partially into the raging sea. The comforting hand of Christ, extended in pure love, reunited the alchemical link, and the spiritual energy flowing from his hand raised Peter once again to safety. Another example of the flow of energy that the Master Jesus caused to emanate, as was the case with the woman who touched the hem of his garment without him being aware of it beforehand, demonstrates the impersonal love of God that responds equally to the call of faith from any of the creatures that he has so wonderfully and purely formed, with the supreme hope that all might enjoy absolute cosmic freedom. These two examples refer to aspects of the great cosmic law that are not commonly known, but which, in general, are debated or evaded by religious groups. The law of energy transfer is essential to the science of alchemy, since without it, it is impossible to create matter. This law determines that something cannot be created from nothing. True knowledge of the impersonal law of energy transfer is likewise essential to correctly understand the great law, because it proves that God, who causes the sun to shine on the just and the unjust alike, manifests through both. During his mission in Palestine, Jesus declared, "The kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and the violent take it by force." It must be understood, then, that it is possible to seize from the hand of God some of the secrets to master the forces of nature and control matter, even when the individual and his motive are not absolutely pure. But let no one ever believe that he who does so will escape answering for his acts, for he is fully responsible for every use or abuse of the energies in his world. The reason why I chose to begin my treatise on alchemy, with a slight admonition and with a sober explanation, is not to frighten anyone, but rather to instill in all readers a deep and constant reverence for God, the only fear permitted in our octave, which means, in reality, a sacred awe that engenders in all who love the great law of love, the utmost respect and adoration for the wisdom that so admirably and wonderfully created all things in the likeness of undaunted freedom. All who abuse the powers of the universe for selfish ends will, sooner or later, realize that they must divest themselves of their ill-gotten gains, and the penalty they must suffer for it is truly terrible. To produce substance to feed the poor, to heal a withered hand with a mere touch, to raise the dead, and even to suspend natural law to perform miracles of infinite wonder through the magic of alchemy, this seems to be, for humanity, the ultimate use it can make of heaven's grace. Let us embrace the spirit of freedom that enables man, created in the immortal, loving, and divinely free likeness of his Creator, to accomplish these things and many more for the benefit of society and for the delight of his benefactors. But above all, let us extol the proper use of the blessed divine science of spiritual alchemy. The ancient alchemist has always been a picturesque figure, even to his own contemporaries. But time has gilded his image with a glory much greater than he ever possessed, which always happens when we approach the aspects of mystery. It is in the simple gifts of life that men are to find their freedom, although its more complex aspects are the progressive expressions of the laws of life, destined to enrich the well-being of this earth and all its inhabitants, harnessing all the good within them for the benefit of the most beautiful world of freedom that can ever be conceived, not even in the mind of a new Atlantean. So much for the moment, as regards mundane society. Let us now take into consideration the individual and his respective role in the use of alchemy. The inner meaning of alchemy is simply all composition, which implies the relationship between the totality of creation and its constituent parts. In this way, and properly understood, alchemy deals with the conscious power that controls mutations and transmutations within matter and energy, and even within life itself. It is the science of the mystic man and is the forte of the self-realized man who, having sought, realizes that he is one with God and is willing to play his part. Over the years, men have tried to glorify me due to the fascination created by distance in time and space, which always leads to the enchantment of perspective. Without belittling myself as the Father's handiwork, and just like the beloved Jesus and others of the great masters of our brotherhood, I have a special interest in every man obtaining his rightful place and the correct understanding of how he is to exercise authority in the universe and in his own world and affairs. Let everyone who begins this study understand that I speak here with a determined purpose, which is to turn each of you into an alchemist par excellence. This means that you must familiarize yourselves on inner levels with the total chemistry of God and with the manner in which every facet of creation manifests in matter, in consciousness, and in your daily lives. In order to accomplish this properly, you will have to meditate and reread these lessons many times, calling upon me and upon your divine self, your I Am presence, so that we may illuminate any point that is not immediately clear to you. Once your Christ self, on inner levels, confers upon you the degree of alchemists of the sacred fire, you will immediately become candidates to be admitted to the outer court of the great white brotherhood. This fact, in itself, is a great incentive for you to become adepts of genuine spiritual alchemy. It has always been a fallacy of human thought to deny the so-called miracles performed in the life of the great avatar Jesus. Nevertheless, he, being a Son of God, revealed to all these powerful formulas which, had they been understood and practiced, would have long ago transformed the planet, converting it into a paradise of perfection. Enough, then, of follies and of human creations. Just as Shakespeare might have expressed it, away, then, with the old, the rot, and the mouldy dust of this shapeless mass. Onward, then, with the eternal vastness of an unbound spirit. A being as free as movement itself seems to be something apart from reality itself, and which projects the image of eternal hope in the most minute gem, or in a drop of dew, within a singular bud. I am for the freedom of all, lovingly, Saint Germain. Chapter 2. The purpose of your alchemical experiment. The void is sterile energy. The alchemist must develop a sense of the value of time and space, and estimate the opportunity to manipulate both. Freedom is won through search and conquest, but above all through the conquest of the finite self. True mastery of the finite comes through centripetal love, the insistent, almost magnetic call of the soul's heart to its divine source. Only the great influence of the cosmic light of God can free the soul from the shadows that man has created, and that keep it captive. Evoke, then, the purity of purpose that will make your creative design good. Challenge, relentlessly, the base elements that arise like impes to disturb and test the initiated plan. Then patiently develop your own divine design, the goal of your alchemical experiment. The true science of the spirit is more exact than what worldly measures can establish thus far. Therefore, recognize that yourself is the white stone or elixir from which all that you create must proceed, orderly elaborated. If the key ideas are not created within yourselves, who are the alchemists, then all action will result either in misfortune or in an imitation of another's work. Now, if it is God whom you wish to imitate, then it can be sincerely said of you, well done. But if it is the vanity of man that you imitate, then your consciousness will remain in a pitiful state. The true self of man, from which all good design proceeds, is worthy of consultation regarding what is fitting to create. Therefore, the true alchemist begins his experiment by communing with himself, in order to perceive the inspiring thoughts of the radiant mind of his Creator. By imitating inferior qualities or lower states of consciousness, society has formed many of its erroneous concepts. In order to correct these concepts, forge a culture that ennobles, and delineate good character, man and society must direct their attention toward noble examples. Let the man who desires to practice alchemy learn first to be a reflection of the great examples of all time, who have used the celestial for their designs, and then let him learn to select the best qualities of his life, so that alchemy may be employed, just as was the divine intention, as the noblest method to attain the desires of the heart right here and now. I strongly suspect that many of my listeners, but few, if any, of the most sincere students, are eager to receive immediately the Philosopher's Stone or the magical properties that will convert them, at will, into a combination of Aladdin and Midas, sprinkled with a pinch of benevolence. For those who think thus, I declare here that, even though in this 9-part treatise I am going to impart extraordinary knowledge concerning the science of alchemy, unless you absorb the secrets of the first lessons with absolute humility, granting me, as your instructor, the privilege of preparing the teachings as God commands me to do so, I doubt very much that you will ultimately succeed, and it will be the fault of neither the teaching nor the teacher. I do not intend to give a long discourse on the vanities of worldly life, however. I would like to indicate that by revealing these teachings now, the Brotherhood hopes to preserve our students from repeating the errors committed by some of the early alchemists, whose only purpose seemed to be the acquisition of riches and honors, and the capacity to extract from universal substance the energies to transform base metals into gold. I want to hasten to tell you that not all early alchemists limited their goals to temporal gains. In fact, many faithful souls dedicated themselves to alchemy with the same reverence with which they would have undertaken the quest for the Holy Grail, considering it a divine art and the origin of the Christian mysteries, as when Christ transformed water into wine at the wedding in Cana of Galilee. We desire that the original concepts regarding alchemy receive a new meaning, and that the meaning it held in the mystery schools be brought to light, since the uses to which this science is currently applied must be translated to a higher dimension if humanity is to reap the maximum benefits therefrom. The purpose with which God ordained this spiritual science will remain unfulfilled unless it is applied to free individuals in society from the drudgery, confusion, and compromise with the densities of human thought, as is our desire. We, who pursue the high calling of the alchemist, aspire to see everyone achieve a position in which they can both exalt and teach the youth of the world the basic objectives of life, showing that they engender pleasures far greater than the merely temporal ones, which, in reality, are less useful to the divine alchemist than a pacifier to a nursing child. Let no one believe that, because I dedicate this time to making known the essentials of the subject, my discourse is not pertinent to immediate affairs. Unless each one understands that he must individually exercise the God-given right to use power with wisdom and love, he will not be able to avoid falling into the abysses of self-deception and self-justification. Now God's plan is that each of the inhabitants of the earth try to understand himself and his destiny. The arrogance born of intellectual pride has caused many sincere students, and even various worldly teachers of one science or another, to fall into the traps of their own making, and in many cases they never realized when they fell into the snare. Therefore, if any subject is included here, let no one believe that he can omit it for the simple fact that it seems already known to him or because he has considered it previously. We place many gems of thought in the least ostentatious sentences, which, even though they are quite plain in their language and easy to see, may demand more than the painstaking scrutiny of even the most sincere heart. St. Peter posed the problem, and if the righteous scarcely be saved, where shall the ungodly and the sinner appear? It is fitting that the aspiring alchemist understand that alchemy is an exact and true science, whose illumination is conferred upon man by God himself. Its purpose is to teach men how to obtain for themselves every gift of grace and every virtue that their life streams might require to find the way back toward their point of origin, in the heart of God. I do not say that you cannot learn to materialize all that your being desires, this aspect of alchemy being for some the easiest part of the whole, while for others it proves the most difficult. What I do say is that one must reflect more upon the design of these desires than upon the marvelous science that causes them to manifest from the invisible, since creating a worthy design is a very noble endeavor, worthy of the God whom we all bear, the only one who can free man to realize his immortal destiny. We have worked below and waited above for the children of this world to end the plunder and pillage of war, foster the education of the needy, abandon the desire for class distinction, and offer themselves, as would the princes of the kingdom, to effectively satisfy the needs of their impoverished but noble lineage. We are determined now to find the faithful of all nations and to empower them with the necessary means so that they may individually escape the self-imposed slavery of these times and obtain their own priceless heritage. It is understood that this heritage is neither temporal nor ephemeral. Nevertheless, when I was in Europe working to diminish somewhat the poverty and confusion that prevailed there, I did make use of universal alchemy to produce the substance which, even though ephemeral in its nature, satisfied many human needs, and was both comforting and useful for the world and for the personal lives of my beneficiaries. I see nothing wrong with the idea, nor do I look with displeasure upon the fact that you have a divine source of provision to satisfy all your needs. However, I do feel it is necessary that you remain always humble and grateful, since God places in your hands the key to control natural forces. Once again, as the most important idea contained herein, I emphasize the constant need to understand the scheme or universal plan of creation, so that all you design and do is in harmony with the eternal law and with cosmic principles. I hope I have not alarmed or discouraged any student of alchemy from continuing with this wonderful divine study. In any case, I can now continue with more delight, since I have magnified the eternally manifest principle of God's immortal intelligence, which some call inspiration and others simply the mind of God. Whatever name man gives to a quality, it is the possession thereof that is of worth to fulfill the 9 points of the law. Therefore, love the emanation of divine wisdom contained herein, which, like the light of the sun shining through the trees, touches with its luminous fingers everything through which it passes, since only through love can you truly possess. I am the resurrection and the life of the cosmic objective within you. In the name of freedom, I remain Saint Germain, Chapter 3. The Sacred Science. The field of individual destiny is controlled by the interplay of multiple cosmic forces, mostly benign, however, in current worldly society. Because humanity misinterprets both earthly and heavenly objectives, these forces have been inverted for other ends, frequently chaotic and disintegrating. Originally, alchemy was intended to be an instrument to enrich individual destiny, to make accessible the technique of transforming base metals into gold, and thereby to produce opulence in everything the successful practitioner undertook. The dedication of the early alchemists to discover the secrets of alchemy was total, and was sanctified by the coordination between their minds and the work of their hands. These alchemists proceeded with their experiments even under the burden of persecution, directed by the entrenched reactionary forces of those days, and it is a tribute to their lives and their honor that they persevered in the quest. Thus they obtained the honest results of their efforts, bequeathing them to humanity as recognized scientific achievements and recorded philosophical knowledge, for the blessing of culture and the archives of this world. Students of this course must increasingly realize that I am determined to give your minds and your feelings a new sense of freedom. The wholesome concepts presented here must indicate to your whole being that the key to alchemy, which is to precede the acquisition of all other keys, is self-mastery in a greater or lesser degree. The true value of this key must be recognized, since self-mastery is the key to all self-knowledge. Therefore, this must be understood and used, at least partially, and you must recognize without a doubt that you yourselves are the alchemist who is to determine the design of your own creation. Furthermore, you must understand yourselves as the real self, and your creation as the product of that self. It may be that some are surprised to learn that the overflowing vortices of man's discordant thoughts and feelings daily impose a hypnotic effect on almost all the inhabitants of the earth. These tend to nullify the great concentration of intelligent and creative power that is the birthright of every man, woman, and child on this planet, although very few make conscious use of it. While a growing number of human beings go in search of freedom, reactionary elements, whether with or without purpose, try to subjugate the human race, placing new shackles upon it every time it manages to free itself from one form of human slavery or another. To succeed, the alchemist must be conscious of his freedom to create, granted by God, and rid himself of those restrictions and coercions imposed upon the soul as forms of human slavery. However, in each case, one must distinguish them from the necessary laws that structure society. Beauty and righteousness must shine on the left hand and on the right of the aspiring alchemist to remind him of the responsibility he has before God and before men to contemplate his works before delivering them, ensuring that they are truly good and profitable for all men. In these studies on alchemy, I reveal methods of visualization that will provide students, provided they apply them as I did, with the capacity to render unto God and man a service of the first magnitude. I trust that the myth of human equality will vanish, and that, in the dignity of equality of opportunity, the evolutions of this planetary home will come to know and love the expansive potential of the Christ in all men. In this way, the steady advance of humanity will be characterized by a greater malleability of the soul and less ignorance of man's universal objective in the development of his individual talents than have existed up to now on Earth. As the early alchemists attained a degree of success in plumbing the secrets of the universe, they saw sharply the need to unite and to keep secret some of the discoveries they had made. From this need arose various religious orders and secret societies, fragments of which have survived to this day. The need for both suppression and expression was recognized, just as enlightened men today realize that harmony in society and among nations, and the extirpation of the causes of war and civil conflicts, eliminate every motive to withhold any knowledge that would result in universal benefit. Let me state, since I can speak in the light of true knowledge, that the early alchemists were not by far as mediocre as history would have us believe. Their discoveries were manifold, including knowledge both secular and religious, both scientific and philosophical. Above all, they discovered many truths that at later dates became general knowledge. Let the world not despise all those stories that have been told about the suppression of inventions and new ideas for economic and political reasons. When it suited them, those who held high positions often instructed their mercenaries to keep secret precisely that knowledge which belongs to all times and which represents the heritage of the inhabitants of all nations. Regardless of such dishonorable conduct, the masters of wisdom will never transmit this knowledge to humanity until the alchemy of reason cures the internal rupture of selfishness in a sufficient number of people, so that the selfless hand of justice may forever hold the torch of knowledge. In these first 3 lessons, I am preparing your minds so that they may better assimilate the full emanation of the flame of wisdom that has been integrated into this course. Frequently, men have become discouraged for not having a certain datum long before it reached their hands. This feeling is certainly understandable, but lamentation devoid of constructive orientation is never beneficial. It is preferable that men perceive that God's hour is reflected in the present moment and not in ancient scrolls. The hieroglyphs that describe the errors of the past are already fading and can neither refute the current truth nor act as a panacea to remedy what was unfortunately sown, but serve only as a contrast to amplify the current feeling of gratitude that rejoices in that progress which manifests today to dispel the ignorance of past times. A resolute dedication to utilizing the energies of the present to open a way toward the mastery of the future is expected of the student of alchemy. Therefore, he must ensure that his current development in the science of alchemy is sufficient to transform the base qualities of human nature into an altar upon which the flame of living reality will animate the greatness of the golden age that is now emerging in the Christ mind. Likewise, his efforts must be sufficient to counteract the torments of worldly injustice, and furthermore, he must work to secure for posterity increasingly abundant eras of progress, illumination, happiness, and universal spirituality. Applied by the alchemist, symbols and symbology, duly understood, are literally charged with meaning. For example, Mercury is the symbol of speed and translates to the consciousness the thought of a watchful and reverent state of alertness that rapidly endows the chemistry with action through the intensity of its application. Salt is equivalent to the idea of individuality and reminds humanity of the need for the individual to preserve the flavor of their divine source, rather than preferring the crystallization of identity within the Sodom and Gomorrah of materiality, represented in the historical figure of Lot's wife. Fire, like life, is the catalyst that can be increased by means of cosmic light contained within cosmic rays in order to intensify and purify the refulgence of life in the contemplated design. Furthermore, the conscious invocation of life makes all the alchemist's manifestations doubly secure. Earth symbolizes the natural crystalline densities, created from the energies of the spirit and sustained by the beings of the elemental kingdom. These tiny creators, imitating human discord, have transferred the discordant patterns of humanity to nature. Thus, the convergence of human error upon the planet appeared in the form of thorn, thistle, insect, and beast of prey, and the Pandora's box of astral forms was opened by laggard civilizations, whose diverted free will and selfishness have perverted the energies of life, even in other planetary systems. It is this discord, imposed upon the very atoms of substance, that the alchemist must eliminate from his laboratory before he can create. It is this dross that the alchemist must purify by means of fire. I do not expect all readers to immediately understand all the concepts contained in this course. While it is true that I advocate simplicity in the phraseology of God's basic laws, I am also aware that thought patterns, expressed in a loftier style, will produce a greater benefit as the world has the capacity to accept them. Therefore, I include here elements intended to stimulate those at all different levels of consciousness to study, so that they may approve themselves before the divine flame within themselves. Thus, all who faithfully practice the teachings will achieve individual alchemical advancements. The most insidious type of slavery is that in which the prisoner is not conscious of his chains. I am certain that the real science of alchemy can serve to free all beings on earth who accept it. Therefore, due to respect for its supreme purpose, I consider it the sacred science. Remember, blessed children of men, that the purpose of true science must be to increase happiness and free the human race from every external condition that does not serve to exalt man to the state of virginal greatness of his original cosmic objective. Every postulate, whether of a social, economic, religious, or scientific nature, should be imbued with the freedom that allows men to make progress. Everyone who progressively attempts to move humanity forward in these fields should recognize that the possibility exists to change without challenging, in any way, those infallible gears of the human spirit that are called life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Undoubtedly, the opportunity to progress and the freedom to make innovations cannot alter the immutability of divine truth, nor the integrity of the Word, whose power reveals its language from those limitless heights to which we all aspire together. Progressing with you in the holy science, I am Saint Germain. Chapter 4. Venture forth, versatility. I am eternally grateful for this multifaceted quality of creation. The universe is fragmented. From its nucleus of union, it is scattered into a diversity of light, color, tone, and density. Every participant in a landscape, whether pastoral or of transitory ugliness, should remember that the splintered beams of light rays that compose the mantle of all creation connect directly with the great source and point of origin of cosmic unity. In my historical experiences, prior to my ascension, which in its ascending action was identical to the elevation of Jesus the Christ, I found myself in a constant state of perceptive grace, during which my inner ears and eyes were fixed upon a beautiful realm of light and perfection that helped remove from my consciousness the thorn of earthly life, producing in me a well-being that went unnoticed by my friends. Frequently, they pondered the cause of my inner serenity without understanding its origin. The contacts I have established with my terrestrial brothers and the times I have appeared since my ascension were not always in circumstances where those I met were aware of my identity or my power. Permit me to state humbly that, as in other similar cases when some member of the ascended hosts chose to part the veil of matter and illusion Maya to contact unascended humanity directly, the latter has entertained angels unawares. I am very aware that some of my readers may opine, all the more so since I am one of those who have passed beyond the veil, that this publication of my words is of a psychic or spiritualist nature. Permit me to affirm quickly that it is neither. Praise be to God that my own life stream need not submit to such forms of limitation. The fact that we are expressing or vibrating our life in higher dimensions, in which the ordinary faculties of man for seeing and hearing do not function, in no way makes our service or our reality less effective, nor does it oblige me to submit to the aforementioned methods of communication. Blessed ones, you do not perceive radio waves with ordinary means. Given that these remain inaudible until they are detected through the miracle of the electronic tube, therefore, trust in the capacity of heaven to communicate directly with man. Since I have dedicated myself to the holy cause of freedom, since I ascended, I have maintained unceasing contact with one or more life streams in embodiment here on earth, and this by cosmic decree and with the approval of the celestial hierarchy. Beloved Jesus and other great beings of light who have descended in fulfillment of the divine plan appeared in the same way to their disciples throughout the centuries and, from time to time, manifest themselves to the men and women of today with no greater effort than that required to tune a radio or television. My purpose in airing the subject of the winged messages of heaven, descending from the great cloud of witnesses, is not as foreign to alchemy as might appear at first glance, given that this shows you a necessary part of my program in the cause for freedom, of which the current series on alchemy forms an integral part. Bear in mind, blessed ones, that the creation of the visible depends entirely on those essences that are not visible to the naked eye, but the central ideas that occupy the minds of the majority of people, because they have their origin in the transitory effects of human causality, are not sufficiently important to be worthy of comment or to be established as permanent reality. I am sure that you will agree with me that just as the realm of ordinary human experience becomes monotonous, for great souls as well as for small ones, it is also a wonderful blessing for them to be able to scrutinize the higher octaves of creation by means of an attuned consciousness, thus drawing inspiration directly from the mind and the God of nature. Ignorance and its consequent violation of the law deprive the individual and society of enlightenment. The only remedy is illuminated obedience, together with scientific attention to the details of the law. The benefits of divine wisdom remain unknown to many, who believe that the usual old theories are adequate to satisfy the demands of the moment and that nothing is required beyond empiricism or the empirical method. In reality, the recognized principles of modern science, only partially true, are incomplete and consequently offer an inadequate basis upon which to support advanced research and the control of the elements. An attitude of complacency impedes progress in any kind of endeavor, whether human or divine. Therefore, grace does not abound where it should. Complacency remains a bulwark of reactive ignorance that prevents humanity from partaking of the abundance that all of heaven is waiting to pour out upon those free souls whose purity of heart and innocent nature make them highly receptive to our thoughts. Before providing you with any deeper knowledge of alchemy, I wish to exalt you to that divine nobility which is as real as the light of day and which represents your greatest strength to undertake the challenges of tomorrow. This may require a certain scrutiny of the spirit of those sincere alchemists whose excursions into the unknown were productive in more than one sense. Even souls who failed totally to discover a method to convert base metals into gold were benefited, beyond what they had ever dreamed, through the blessings they received as a result of their quest. Even persecution served to join them in a unity concentrated on a common purpose, which in itself is a feat amidst human diversity with its unfortunate tendencies toward greed and selfishness. I cherish the hope that you will prepare yourselves to succeed in your endeavors. Above all, prepare yourselves to make the necessary changes in your thoughts and preconceived ideas which will allow you to emerge victorious. If man expects to succeed in alchemy, which in truth depends on the higher laws of spiritual science, he must foster the faith upon which the strength of his invocation and concentration will rest. The fusion of metals, the control of atomic forces, and the directing of electronic energy through the mind of man when acting in higher dimensions prove quite easy once their mastery is acquired. Nevertheless, after having depended for many years on the five senses and having accepted, consequently, mortal limitation, I am convinced that you can realize how absolutely important is the fact that you adjust your way of thinking to new possibilities, so that it functions free from human restrictions and the disparagement of divine ardor by those who, through not knowing, affirm, impossible. Permit me, in the name of freedom, to say to all, try it. While you prepare your consciousness to receive the knowledge of tomorrow, be aware, then, of the need to reflect on the origin of the concepts concerning limitations. My beloved ones, you must be reasonable and balanced in all your acts, but bear in mind that true science borders on the miraculous for those who do not understand its formulas. You approach a solid wall with the idea that you cannot pass through it, but it is not solid at all. Rather, it has as many holes as the wire of a chicken coop. You cannot walk on hot coals without burning your feet, and yet the sorcerers of cultures less enlightened than your own do so without harm. Innumerable miracles of Christ have been reproduced by men and women of different ages and regions since his wonderful advent, and yet, due to human skepticism and forgetfulness, all this wonder has been relegated to the realm of myth or to the imagination of credulous minds. I would like to advocate here for the renewal of faith in the power of God, since this is a requirement for anyone who aspires to be a prodigious man of spiritual feats on behalf of the holy objectives of universal law itself. Without faith, it is not only impossible to please God, but I declare to you that it is impossible to manifest the perfection of his laws. Since faith is such a great requirement, would it not be very profitable for everyone to re-examine their reasons for doubting? Note well that the majority of doubts arise from patterns of self-deception, from the practice of fraud, and from the failure of the human mind to carry out its professed integrity. Recognizing, then, that such negative conditions derive from a consent to error, would it not be much more sensible for everyone to direct their gaze toward me and live? With God, all things are possible, however, as in any other science. Proficiency is generally not acquired without knowledge and its persistent application. The few who are the exception to this rule could be termed geniuses, but when the law is understood in its entirety, it will be proven that even they had their hours of diligent study and practice. I wish to point out especially that, in revealing alchemical secrets in this course, we pursue the goal of placing in your hands and in the laboratory of your consciousness the knowledge of the law, which we ourselves have used throughout the centuries with the greatest success, and with that reverence for life, which is a prime necessity for the inquiring mind, which is balanced in the loving intention of a sincere heart. Here, vain curiosity is replaced by the moral greatness that elevates man above his fellows, such that it turns him into a divine star in the firmament of his contemporaries. Exalted, then, not by false pride or intellectual misunderstandings, the true alchemist maintains his humble bearing, fixing his expectant gaze on the master, who will impart to him the inestimable knowledge of the centuries, provided his attitude and dedication are correct. May I cherish the tender hope that you will reread the first lessons and assimilate from them a new sense of progress and new possibilities. I am determined that many in this class succeed, and I will continue to do my part above and below in your octave, so that this may be fulfilled, and so that great illumination, hope, peace, and understanding may be born and renewed in all of you. I remain yours faithfully, Saint Germain. Chapter 5. Need, Power, and Motive to Change. The moment of the present hour is to be used as a chalice of spiritual opportunity. Life must find itself pleased in its highest aims, honored by devotion to ennobling principles, and deserved through selfless service. Beloved ones, the power to change is found within every man. Give preference to this power, revere it above every limiting condition, and observe how the alchemy of the self expands. Transmute the lies of a dark substance that prevent your souls from flying upward. Recognize that the conditions of all human limitation are nothing but phantoms parading on the stage of mortal existence, with the sole purpose that eternal reality may bury them forever. Every man must be conscious of his alternatives and choose either freedom or captivity while exploring the chemistry of his current state, focusing it in the mirror of truth and deciding afterwards to change every base condition, thereby building, within the crucible of the moment, that sacred progress born of an eternal perception. Destroy, then, the base and senseless mania of thinking that you have your origin in matter, that possessive nature, a perversion of the mother who, unable to esteem all cosmic possibilities, limits herself to the trifles and baubles of a temporary possession. Allow heaven to use your consciousness to widen the vision toward the infinite, and then contemplate, finally, the beautiful possibilities that exist in the most desperate external conditions. Give abundance to those lacking spirit, understanding to the rich, and mercy to all. It often happens that a life stream possesses in abundance precisely those qualities that his neighbor lacks. Exchange your virtues by exalting the valleys of your neighbor, and trust that life will eliminate the peaks of both his pride and your own. Transmute those undesirable conditions of your world by making a resolute and persistent effort. Every divine being who exalts the life of God within you knows that the power to do these things is in your hands right now, within the reach of your intelligence and spirit. Build those spirals of attainment that compose the celestial city and envelop the world of physical substance, the conscious mind, and the feelings of your hearts with the radiance of the immortal spheres. When contemplating the universe with renewed hope, recognize the need to maintain the proper attitude. Vanity has predominated on earth for too long. Marvelous opportunities, like spirits in the night, have disappeared with the dawn, hindered by the cold shackles that enclose the soul in a layer of disintegrating elements descending in the hourglass. The Son of Elizabeth asked Christ, "Are you he who was to come, or shall we wait for another?" Christ's answer referred to his miraculous acts. The deaf heard again, the blind saw again, and the lame walked again. The lesson contained in his answer urges every life stream to accept the greatness of his own reality. Everyone should recognize that life has given them its great and marvelous gifts through the consciousness of the I am He, which must emerge from the cave of materialism. The crass separation of the whole into deficient and incomplete component parts, a concept men have of themselves as particles distant from their source, forces them to battle with human misfortune, instead of accepting the grandiose concept of cooperative unity that is charged with the power of love and limitless freedom. The truth lifts everyone and defeats no one but the enemies of righteousness, whose shadowy mistakes turn them into little more than wild animals in the jungle of human creation. Life has even given them more mercy than they deserve. I know this because I have the record before me. Beloved Kuan Yin has pleaded for mercy and has given it generously to all, limitlessly and freely. This is the great gift of God. He always returns to life more love than life ever gives to him. Selflessly, God's greatness emits torrents of love when a few drops would be sufficient, advancing humanity on its ascending path of pilgrimage, regardless of erroneous human notions. Now then, depending on others is not the solution to your problems, nor will it serve to fulfill the plan that God has designated for you, blessed sons of man. As alchemists enlightened by the torch of divine knowledge and conscious of the magnificence of true individuality, you must evoke strength from the invisible realm and use, in your worlds and affairs, the procedures of transmutative alchemy to overcome daily all external conditions through spiritual means and physical instruments available to you. You will not always be asked to make bricks without straw, which may seem extremely difficult, but for the determined alchemist, it is only an obstacle to be overcome. None of those who currently inhabit the earth should limit their understanding of the concept that now is the propitious moment that rides every wave of opposition and leads it toward the apogee of victory. Everyone should consider that his life, in any age or time, is susceptible to improvement, and that he himself has the capacity to overcome, by force of will, any condition. Law and justice are the natural factors of control, but the universe, guided by its own law, possesses the creative methods to transcend that law, approximating cosmic dimensions and expanding geometrically to the infinite. The friends of freedom must reject old ideas as soon as they can and discard antiquated concepts like outmoded clothing. In the times of Christopher Columbus, humanity could hardly accept the fact that the world was round and submitted dogmatically to the theory that the earth was flat. Chemical formulas, of both basic and complex matter, are simple for the chemist, but to the unlearned they seem only a tangle of symbols. Our objective in this course is not only to provide knowledge, but rather to foster in you the acceptance of it through an almost a priori methodology. This is required because the categorical proof of alchemical laws is evidenced universally and necessarily through the effect they have on man. Let there be light within your personal realm and within the sphere of your being. Life is not an experiment, although men have experimented with it. Humanity has followed the current of the peripheral world of effects, neglecting the internal causative realm. All misery is rooted in the basic factors of cause. Correct the defects, and you will heal, discovering yourselves. I am interested in completely overturning harmful human attitudes and replacing them with correct methods and concepts, so that all life may quickly overcome the human energy field of heavy and gravitating magnetism that prevents humanity from ascending progressively. Let every aspiring alchemist proceed first to transform himself here and now through transmutation, thus gaining inner peace and a sense of external fulfillment, especially at the conclusion of each term of life. Without a doubt, the intensity of man's positive control, which has the power to alter substance inside and out, cannot manifest the blessing designated by God for all to enjoy and make daily use of, unless a focus is preserved both within and without, where the good is accentuated. Beloved ones, to live to receive reward or punishment is not a reason for being. The majority of the inhabitants of the earth have not rationally understood the intrinsic destiny of life that is anchored only in a few. Daily, thousands of people obtain satisfaction in betting, racing, or games of chance, with the hope of winning despite the tremendous odds, since they ignore the surest law of all, the cosmic design. Those who deny God or life itself do so for lack of a genuine experience. These have not experienced within themselves the dawn of pure reason. They prefer to accept the popular ideas that are associated with the attitude of not being credulous. Legion, therefore, are the losses that people such as these have suffered, and, although I do not hold the hope of changing every one of those individuals, I advise here again that all feel inspired to continue persevering. The quest is worth every effort. I know the law. The alchemy of action proves itself. Those who wish to engage in a discussion to prove the non-existence or non-essentiality of a first cause may not want to deprive themselves of the passing pleasure of it. On the other hand, if they submit to divine logic, the golden grain of truth will replace the husks of pride found in the suffocating and impenetrable systems of the human intellect, which disdains verifying any knowledge that the physical senses do not experience. Frequently, individuals enjoy imagining that they are closely related to the venerable sages. Now then, I believe that the centuries I lived before ascending, and those that have elapsed since, authorize me to make certain distinctions in this regard. Neither vanity nor human motives could inspire me to write this series. I keep in mind only the profound love I feel for the earth as a unit in its cosmic progress, and I desire to transmit here something of the sweet simplicity of this love and of the wisdom that guides it. Let us see now how reasonable it is to suppose that a sufficient number of people serving harmoniously can change even the most petrified condition, creating a flow of love that will traverse peaks and valleys, inspiring the closing of the breach between the real of eternal alchemy and the artificial that surges from the caves of degrading errors. Then, the gold of personal integrity and integration that will emerge will be a gift that all will share equally. The individual will reflect absolute genius, and society the heavenly kingdom. The forces that would like to bind humanity to its past errors, preventing the flame of peace from being kindled at present, must be bound in their turn in heaven as on earth. And humanity must rise to sound the death knell here and now for these forces, before the war ends. Only in the true understanding of life and of the alchemy of being can one be freed from confusion. Step by step, I am leading you to the correct understanding of alchemy. In the first lessons, I have reminded you of your responsibility to prove the law of your own being, making due use of alchemy. Now, I bring to your memory the need to realize changes in yourselves where they may be advantageous. Finally, I will teach you the art and practice of precipitation. A prerequisite for applying the methods of precipitation is knowing what you desire to precipitate. This is the truth that Jesus taught in the Lord's Prayer, and when he said, "Not my will, but thine be done," the will of God, the will of the Most High, is the will of your real self, of the most important part of yourselves. Given that the lower self, even while continuing to have the capacity to enter into contact with a higher self through the soul, is nothing more than a bundle of impulses, filled with particles of human knowledge, I recommend that you come to know the reality of your being, since this reality is the genie within you that can give Aladdin the legitimate desires of his immortal being. Reflect now upon the necessity to change, upon the power to change, and upon the motive to change, in order to develop from the passing flame of seriousness the permanent sun of renewed hope. Graciously, I am Saint Germain. Chapter 6. Molding factors. Ah, the mold. There is the problem, yes, for the mold also contaminates. But how beautiful was God's hope when creating each life stream. After the descent into the world of form and material substance, the formative years take place, wherein pressures both boisterous and silent leave their impression upon the virginal whiteness of the individual's consciousness. Beginning with the first affectionate gaze of gaping parents and relatives, a series of environmental factors gradually accumulates, serving to create patterns and concepts upon the tender screen of the embryonic mind. These molding factors continue to exert their multifaceted influences upon the plastic personality of man. This individuality, then, which first identifies totally with the good of God, finds itself affected and molded by countless patterns of experience. It is thus that example carves the mind and being of man either for good or for evil. However, experience is not the only way to expand consciousness, given that every moment spent with God or with a member of his cosmic legions exalts and widens individual consciousness, providing illumination instantly in the twinkling of an eye. The empirical proof of human imperfection is comprised in the past and present lives of the masses. A life in captivity or in danger despises the meaning of existence. Religion and the hope for salvation surge from the human heart and spring from the human tree. The alchemy of modification was needed in the days of Jesus and continues to be needed because, all too often, the mold is imperfect and the product cannot be better than its matrix. I have said the mold also contaminates, and with this I call your attention to the untransmuted accumulation of human filth and misery which, like garbage, are scattered on the sidewalks of human consciousness, giving off odors from the counters of mundane literature. The encrusted mold disguises itself as legitimate culture while undermining the decency of robust souls. Freedom of the press was not designed so that corrupters of young minds would have freedom of action, nor to confuse and disorganize the populace by flooding their brains with linguistic propaganda and discriminations based on prejudices. Rather, the free press was designed to engender the power of light and inspire in all a due sense of cosmic destiny. O America, my beloved country! How precious are the footprints of your heroes, known and unknown, although the heart of every mother may feel a justified pride when, with the consent of the governed, she offers the fruit of her life, the sons and daughters par excellence, who, from the heart of this beloved nation, serve the cause of freedom throughout the earth. Due to the horrendous effects of the mold, and by the very mold that must be countered, I make these comments concerning personal freedom attained through the correct use of alchemy. I do not say that we will not speak further on this subject, throughout and until the end of this course, but rather that, herewith, I give my specific advice to those who wish to make use of alchemy to foster their personal advancements regarding the fulfillment of the divine plan, thereby improving their current conditions. Those who know the procedure of refining precious metals know that intense heat is required to liquefy many of them. Heat is also needed to separate impurities and foreign matters from the pure metal. The separation of the dross is carried out in a twofold manner. 1. A part evaporates and mixes with the atmosphere of the room where the refining furnace is lit. 2. And a large part of the undesirable substance is brought to the surface where it is skimmed off by the alert refiner. Concerning this, few are the parents endowed with the type of knowledge required to give their children the faculty to understand, from the beginning, the principles of their total freedom. I do not say that the world is not full of aspirations and good intentions, but this kind of road does not seem to lead to the best places. That is why the children of the world, from generation to generation, understand more and more of martial arts and artifices and the many customs of mundane society, without feeling too excited by the regenerated and peaceful society of the saints. In the majority of cases, few are those born and who pass their lives with the correct understanding of the universal goal, and inevitably, personal destinies, which often move in a direction contrary to the universal flow, are periodically blocked and ruined. The pages of history are filled with the collapsings of tyrants and the defeats of monsters of wrong purposes. Failure and success provoke acceptance in many fields, while the ordinary man heads toward the cemetery of mediocrity. Nothing is further from the plan of God and nature than these false imitations of the golden mean. How inadequate is the concept of a destiny that can be modeled by human mistakes? How noble are those who recognize an intellect, a mind, a spiritual shepherd, and a creator, whose foresight, even greater than that of his emissaries, reveals itself as a mountain of universal purpose climbed by the brave, who do not hesitate nor fear to trust in the wisdom of the first climbers of the rugged summits of the apogee. Those who are in contact with the lifeline of these spiritual pioneers receive greater counsel, given that the elder brothers of the race lovingly offer them the freedom of all ages as a gift of faith. This gift is offered to all those who, upon accepting this faith, can likewise have the will power to aspire to it, and the perseverance to allow it to form them in an even purer mold and into an accumulation of this purity, the reality of which is the treasure of heaven. Beloved friends of freedom, you now find yourselves at the entrance of the advanced truths of alchemy, which I make known in the 7th lesson. However, it is necessary that you contemplate your lives in the light of perfect harmony with the spirit of universal alchemy. Do not act again guided by the vanity of desiring recognition, but by the value of a necessary achievement and because service is necessary and worthy in itself. God needs a vehicle to manifest in the world of form, and you lend him your hands and your feet. It is necessary that you understand the mystery of oneness, by means of which a thread of contact between each life and its source serves to connect all who live with a great central switchboard. Here, the reciprocal action between thought and feeling is guarded, so that no part of life may be hurt in the holy mountain of God. Consider all possible beauty of life and perceive it as pure gold. Every motive of unhappiness, every vibration of discord, fear, doubt, suspicion, condemnation, criticism, censure, and self-justification, and all negative peculiarities are part either of the human mold or of the mold that must be purged like dross, so that purity may regenerate a life stream that allows the individual to partake without reservation of the waters of life. It is not enough for men to come to drink, because they have received the invitation from higher sources. They have to make new wineskins to preserve the new wine of infinite goodness and purpose. This is spiritual alchemy, and wise is he who first attains this mastery within himself, before attempting to govern the elements of others or of nature, for in this way karma is justified by wisdom and rendered benign. Sin does not appear at the door of such a practitioner, since his motives, objectives, and methods are pure, and his deeds are just. Gracious alchemists, the mere fact that you are studying this course should demonstrate your interest in progressing. The simple word improving holds a spiritual lesson that must be learned thoroughly. The words impression and proving combine here to indicate that life transmits its impressions to the heart of your consciousness to prove the worth of each impression. Thereby, every vain thought is judged before the magnificence representing the greater glory of God, the ethereal light of the firmament. The mind of Christ is synonymous with the mind of light and characterizes the person who specifically accords with the greater intelligence. The flow of impressions that generally come from the world should be used by the student to compare and prove the pure patterns of heaven's designs. When these impressions are improved by the alchemical fire, they become the strength of man's useful objects and ideas, permanent matrices of the good, which attract to his consciousness more impressions of this kind. This is how the kingdom of individuality spreads on wings of celestial wisdom, demonstrated daily by words spoken from the hills of spiritual alertness. The sincere alchemist knows that the vast intelligence that created all that exists expands powerful wings of light over the entire cosmos, as above in the macrocosm, so below in the microcosm, in the minimized world of appearances, this intelligence is individualized. God's alert care is always manifested in his wonderful designs as a guardian presence, which seeks not profanation, but the glorious realization of each of the persons in whom burns the flame of the all-powerful and ever-present life. So-called physical death does not represent the end of being, but merely divides eternal life into compartments of identity and experience, so that expansion and opportunity may be fully utilized and every worn-out mold discarded. The aspirant can gather the forgotten fragments and weave them, thread by thread, until forming a tapestry of such beauty that it produces in the beholder a feeling of gratitude for the perfection and the glory present in every day of eternity. I am aware of the human discouragement created when one identifies with the elements of disintegration within society. I know perfectly well the frauds practiced in the name of religion, but I do not concern myself so much with these matters, but rather with those lives that emerge from the crucible of experiences, clad in a marvelous gold-patinated garment. Their lives never have to be empty because life, which is intelligent and considerate, cares for them. Life is palpable, real, serious, and tender. Life is dramatic and is headed toward glory. The high road, in contrast to the low road, is the path of the alchemist, whose heart is found in the resplendent glory always and at every moment that his pilgrim foot treads the dusty roads of man, transmuting, and transmuting that dust into the purest radiance. I am the life, I am the truth, and I am the way, Saint Germain. Chapter 7. Methods of Transfer. Light is the key to alchemy. The words, "Let there be light," represent the first fiat of creation and the first step toward proper precipitation. When man, who is already a manifestation of God in his own right, desires to emulate the Supreme Father and precipitate, just as a true son of light should learn to do, he must follow the methods used by the Supreme Intelligence if he hopes to have uniform and worthy results. When the obvious methods of the Creator are examined and nature is observed, many valuable things can be deduced, provided one educates oneself to think freely. For it is necessary to overlook merely human syllogisms and penetrate the limitless consciousness of God, who is the great master alchemist, to go and do likewise, always considering as good the services one renders. When you make the decision within yourselves to experiment with the art of precipitation, you must first create a mental blueprint of the object you wish to produce. This should include the exact size, its proportions, its material, its density, color, and quality of the visualized form in all its details. Once the visualization of the blueprint is completed in the mind, it must be sealed immediately. This is an essential step for it to enter quickly and effectively into the world of material form. Do not misunderstand this step by believing that by sealing your plan you end all possibility of improving your design. It is not so, since it can be improved in subsequent models, but unless you hand over said blueprint as something finished to the elementals and the builders of form, they cannot cause it to manifest properly. The words "it is finished" constitute therefore the second fiat of creation after "let there be light." Now that you have just created a thought matrix, sealing it against the intrusion of interfering mental radiations from others, emitted either consciously or unconsciously due to the resistance to progress of the collective mind of the masses, you must observe the third rule to protect your creative intent: tell no one. This is also a law of precipitation that allows you to entrap concentrated rays of human thought and feeling patterns that can considerably disturb the success of an alchemical experiment unless certain safeguards are activated. Avoid, then, the dissipation of energy due to the intrusion of a multiplicity of minds, except in those cases where two or more individuals cooperate specifically in a joint precipitation. Those who are scientific by nature and are familiar with Coulomb scattering and Rutherford's law will understand how thought energy, like waves dispersing other waves as if they were composed of tiny particles, can establish a penetration great enough to break down the magnetic energy field of thought that centers on the specific pattern of the creative matrix. Every student should recognize the geometric figures, such as the square, the triangle, the circle, the ellipse, and the parallelogram, are used almost universally to perform an act of creation in both the macrocosmic world and the microcosmic three-dimensional world. Although in the mathematical world of algebra, calculus, and trigonometry higher creative forms are found, the highest symbology, known to us on inner spiritual levels, is the science of engrammic rhythms. This study is dedicated to the control and emanation of energy through engrams, to the use of mantras, to the accumulation of fahatic energy, and to the safeguards that put into action the principles of demarcation between the evolutions of human consciousness on the planes of matter and the world of perfect divine order existing on the planes of spirit. When reflecting on this science, one should take into account that even the infinite and omnipresent consciousness of God, extending into the realm of material creation, passes through the whole gamut of creative expressions, from the simplest patterns to those of greatest complexity. The student of alchemy should consider memory, when employed as an instrument of the higher mind, as an invaluable accessory for his experiments, given that the processes of human memory are truly admirable. And when these are coordinated with the mental body, a superlative action must always be performed. Therefore, there are several individuals who are capable of memorizing and executing an entire symphony without making noticeable errors. Mathematicians also demonstrate wonderful faculties of mental control in calculations that reach almost infinite precision. Let every student of alchemy recognize, then, that within himself he carries a higher mind that is capable of containing patterns of infinite dimensions. This mind functions independently of the outer mind, exempt from any human restriction. Therefore, being the vehicle of the higher mind, a purified memory body is indispensable for the alchemist, given that this body transmits the impressions of this mind to the outer mind. Let the sincere student, eager to reflect and practice the methods that control the mind and the memory, which are the methods of God himself, acquire the habit of consciously giving to his blessed higher mind, or his Christ, self the responsibility of designing and perfecting the ideas and the embryonic models of his creation. For many of these models, which at first sight seem to be consciously conceived by the alchemist, often have their origin in this higher part of the blessed self. Remember that your higher mind is in action 24 hours a day, in expanded dimensions. This blessed comforter, unknown and unperceived by you outwardly, is waiting for you to call him into action and acts free from the ordinary limitations of time and space. Use, then, your higher mind, employing it both in the role of apprentice and in that of master, for the Holy Spirit of truth, active therein, can lead you into all truth. I would like to call the students' attention to the fact that, if they so desire, they can help themselves immeasurably in the arts of alchemy with additional reading. However, care must be taken in this, so that the secondary aspects of technology and scientific theory do not divert the mighty flow of alchemy, the major science, into secondary paths of materialism, where the ends justify the means, as is often said. I realize perfectly well that many related subjects would not only be boring to some of our students, but would also be beyond their comprehension. Since I do not want to prevent the masses from receiving the blessings of alchemy, I have deliberately expressed many of these points in such a way that they can be easily understood. But let no one believe that all knowledge can be attained with a mere focus on it, or without effort and without study. For those who desire more technical information to broaden this course, I suggest they study the following subjects: wave propagation, quantum mechanics, elementary and advanced chemistry and physics, seismology, astronomy, geology, and related subjects. These studies, together with courses in the humanities, world religions, and the works of Shakespeare, will be of immense value to you, provided you guide yourselves inwardly and through your personal tastes. Let no one believe that the study of these additional subjects is absolutely necessary, or that it is an order given by the masters, since the teachings of greatest importance are included here, although between the lines in some cases. Allow God to guide you, and to those who do not perceive his reins, I say to you, there is no reward without effort. I harbor a certain hope that material science will not view with too much suspicion the fact that the power of the mind and the spirit has control over matter. I doubt that religion can fully deny the so-called miracles, demonstrating that individuals who have lived on earth have been capable of carrying out transmutation, which consists simply of changing one form into another, such as water into wine, the amplification and multiplication of atomic and molecular substance, as in the multiplication of the loaves and fishes, and the precipitation of the elements, such as calling down fire from heaven. Equally wonderful feats performed by ascended and unascended masters prove the existence of the extremely exact science of the control of matter and energy. I, for my part, have never doubted the truth of these things, simply because I have always humbly preserved the faith that the power of good endures. Furthermore, my activity demonstrates the laws of alchemy that convert the entire procedure of controlling matter and energy into a daily matter. I realize that the uninitiated, or those who have never witnessed the so-called miracles, can easily call their authenticity into question. Alchemists of God, I do not ask you to believe only. I ask that, to a certain degree, you begin to demonstrate these truths for yourselves. A few students of the higher law have been capable of successfully exteriorizing, directly from the universal, one or more visible objects, such as a rose, a precious stone, or a cup with a liquid essence that vivifies both the mind and the body. Naturally, we are eager to see people acquire the power to produce absolutely everything directly from the universal. Nevertheless, such secrets can scarcely be written or clarified in an explicit and total manner, because we cannot disrupt the current economic system until the inhabitants of Earth have established greater justice, but neither can these secrets be justifiably hidden from those who are worthy of them. Therefore, we have included wonderful keys throughout this course, which will open many doors to progress, evident to the faithful or to those who strive to be so. Every ascended master possesses the powers to precipitate at will, and therefore never lacks any good thing. Let unascended men ask themselves this question: how long will they waste their energies fighting to barely eke out a meager existence from the storehouses of nature, which for some really seem to be empty, when all their needs can be satisfied by mastering the cosmic laws, which Jesus Christ and other great masters of the past have demonstrated with their own lives? The use of the term light in alchemy comprises light both in its known visible aspects and in its invisible characteristics, some of which are still unknown to physical science. When I produced rare gems and precious stones through alchemy, the methods I used could not have been easily applied by an ordinary person had they not acquired the necessary mental control through discipline, faith, and a meditative stillness. These methods are known to every initiate, and only an initiate could be tempted by the forces of evil as much as they tempted Jesus, who, conscious of his alchemical power, rejected the temptation to make use of alchemy during the time his faith was tested. Instead of alleviating his physical discomfort by giving the order for these stones to become bread, as he could have done, he showed his loyalty to the supreme presence of God in his being, and to the Word of God, giving much more importance to them than to the demands of his physical body. This helped him pass the test, and prepare to master the disciplines that gave him his victory on the cross and in the tomb, raising him from the hill of Bethany into the arms of God. However, many seem to give less importance to spiritual alchemy and prefer more spectacular forms of psychic phenomena, rather than obtaining the transmutative changes that would divinize them. Men scarcely imagine that the promise, "All these things shall be added unto you," includes the power to control the wind and the waves, as well as substance and energy, once man has made the kingdom of God his primary and most important objective. Nevertheless, a balance is required, and it gives me great pleasure to tell the students once again that the use of alchemy, for the purpose of effecting changes in the physical octave, is in no way improper if used adequately. The methods of alchemy can be expressed with simplicity and absorbed easily, however. Its precepts require the practice of a master artist. Nevertheless, results can be obtained in diverse ways, provided the student at least begins with it and tries. There exist many methods of precipitation, but here I am going to partially outline only one of them. First, design a mental matrix of the desired object, then determine where you want it to manifest. If you know the material substance of which it is composed, memorize its atomic formation. If not, call upon the divine intelligence within your higher mind to copy the desired formula, taking it from the universal intelligence, and to imprint it upon your memory body and your mind. Recognize that light is an energy substance that manifests universally on Earth, thanks to the solar center of being, to the focus of the Christ in this solar system. Make the call for the light to assume the atomic formation you hold fixed in your mind, to conglomerate around this formation, and then to densify, becoming form. Make the call for this atomic structure to multiply until the molecules of the substance begin to fill the void of the space in which you desire the object to appear. When the whole outline is filled with the vibratory action of the four-dimensional substance representing the desired manifestation, ask that the atomic density lower fully into three-dimensional form and substance in accordance with the formation established by the matrix in your mind, and then wait for the results. Do not become tense if your manifestation does not take place immediately or if, after a reasonable period of time, it seems it will yield no result. Remember, O Blessed Ones, that despair destroys the very faith upon which your experiment is based, since faith is the certainty of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, and you must preserve your faith as you hold fixed the gossamer veil that composes the mental image. If you have spent years under the grip of human emotions, absorbing the discord of the collective consciousness, the doubts and fears of humanity, these records must be consumed by the alchemical fires to give way to these noble ideas and forms you would like to create with the imagination. You must dedicate your time and energy to your new ideas. With this, you begin to weave a web of joy dedicated to spirituality, to the spiritualization of material consciousness, and to the materialization of celestial concepts here on Earth, where the kingdom of God must manifest. I would like to indicate that the method of scanning used in the projection of television images, when an electronic current emits rays of fluorescent light onto a screen and the electronic particles move in the form of horizontal lines, creating a visible image in a microsecond, cannot be used effectively in alchemical precipitation, but it is highly appropriate for the projection of mental images from afar. In precipitation, a rapid three-dimensional expansion of light rays must take place, whereas in the method employed on the screen, the optical image is flat, of a single-dimensional plane. The study of cytology and embryology will provide the student with an understanding of how a cell multiplies and reproduces. When they want to carry out an instantaneous manifestation, the speed and intensity of light must reach an astounding rapidity and power. It must be understood that the fact that the mind exercises such control over matter is not an ordinary procedure. While I do not say that common and ordinary people cannot master the technique to put these laws into practice, and that the humblest individual cannot be invested or invest himself with such authority within the inalienable rights that God grants to man, I do not wish for a feeling of frustration to arise among those who attempt precipitation, nor for them to feel discouraged because they apparently fail. And I say apparently because the law is infallible. In the majority of cases where direct precipitation is not carried out, if the effort and technique are observed with full trust that the call demands the answer, sooner or later, an indirect precipitation will occur, whereby the desired manifestation takes place in one form or another. Remember that this is an art of supreme quality and is likewise a co-creation with God, and that, as such, those who utilize it best are those whose purposes flow parallel to the divine ones. Therefore, when the will of man is aligned with the will of God, the light of God precipitates said will without fail in the fullness of time, space, and opportunity. I have dedicated 6 lessons to this subject, dealing with practical methods that help the spiritual scientist obtain greater personal happiness day by day through the fusion of the person with the patterns of the principle itself. To successfully develop spiritual powers, it is necessary to possess an inner and outer peace, and a sense of personal well-being, although some individuals thrive in the midst of conflicts. I admit that bold leaders are needed on Earth in many fields of action to discover and develop the type of society that could be considered as designed by the gods. In addition to the alchemy of instantaneous precipitation, the alchemy of preparation is required, intelligently planning the use of the individual's energies and opportunities, so that life does not receive a haphazard return on its investment of energy in a life stream. I harbor the hope that, up to this moment, my readers are not disappointed by the modest use I have made of their time and attention. I humbly affirm that the repeated reading of this material will further enlighten each of you regarding the true depth of my perceptions, which are designed to elevate those who belong to different social and religious strata to regions of greater benefit for themselves, for humanity, and for God. If after concluding this course I have achieved this to a certain degree, or have increased the possibility for it, I will be content. Some of you may want me to guide you personally when you attempt your first alchemical precipitation. I will gladly help all those who silently ask for my assistance, provided that the motive is just and the desired change beneficial to their life plan, and that they are careful and offer their prayers so that the will of God is fulfilled at all times. Allow me to suggest to you, then, that your first attempt be the precipitation of an amethyst in the shape of a Maltese cross. This would be most excellent, since I have personally used alchemy to make many experimental models, and I am extremely happy to add my momentum to yours. From the simple to the complex, from the dawn of the beginning of the use of the rays of light to the meridian zenith of progress, let all walk along the paths of life like a caravan of faith. Let every aspiring alchemist aim toward the mark of attainment. You build in the eternal light right now. Dedicated to your success, I am Saint Germain. Chapter 8. Directing Consciousness. Now we approach, with reverent stillness and with the admiration of sacred understanding, the great spiritual laws that govern all outer manifestation. The designs of God are more palpable to each man as he appreciates them more. Recognize how foolish it is to submit to the false principles of any educational system, however. It is equally foolish to deny the inherent truth and the proven precepts of academic knowledge. Know yourselves to know nature, but master the art of sacred synthesis, whereby the righteousness of truth shall serve to integrate into the field of knowledge that internal relativity and that cosmic measure between nature and the self, whose exact mathematical action indicates that, just as God expresses himself in his geometry, man is also capable of systematically perceiving and demonstrating a correlative understanding of the marvelous works of God's hands without the fallacious spell of the carnal mind. By divesting creative grace of the vibrations of human thoughts and feelings, all the substance of life shines, purified by eternal hands. Now then, so it should be. The grossest error and the most intense suffering are the result of having wrongly approached pure reason. Do you realize, blessed children of men, that there are few on earth who would consciously continue doing evil if, for certain, they were convinced that they are doing so? Therefore, it is incumbent upon the master alchemists of humanity to serve God and man as much as they can, eliminating every trace of malice and ignorance from the screen of human consciousness, beginning with the personal concepts of each one of them. Knowing how tenderly the students of this course hang on my every word, I too am imbued with a sense of reverence toward the imminent service. I cannot conceive how we could do less than answer the calls directed to us, in accordance with a great cosmic law. Even an ascended being who is in intimate contact with human beings could almost be possessed by a sense of urgency and the desire to break the chains that keep any blessed soul in captivity. However, for us, it is only possible to show the way and provide the specific guidance and service prescribed by the Karmic Council. The warning, man, know thyself, has to be applied by you to the pure truth of being and not to human concepts of what truth is. However, it is dangerous to criticize one's neighbor or his concepts, because only the individual himself can perceive, through the screen of his own being, his world, and beyond the cosmos. When you recognize what it means to interpret life for yourselves, you will realize how absolutely impossible it is to do so for another person, all the more so since an ordinary person cannot effectively penetrate the consciousness of another life stream, nor accurately appreciate all the processes of his thoughts and feelings. By the grace of God, we are able to do it, and the Karmic Council, together with the universal Christ self of all men, is able to mediate. We often hesitate to interfere with individual karma, unless we are besought vehemently, whereas foolish, unascended humanity frequently rushes to decide how an individual is to live or think. I trust that the students of this activity are understanding more and more how much they can help one another if they hold the immaculate concept of each one's life plan, then leaving the higher self of each one to guide him. I have well observed, through the centuries, the importance that a service of systematic prayers holds. The daily offering of prayers has saved the lives of millions of people, has expanded the lives of other millions of people, and has limitlessly blessed all life. Prayer opens the door for God to intervene in human affairs. It provides an avenue in which the ascended masters and cosmic beings who wish to serve planet Earth and its evolutions can walk within the folds of universal justice and render special assistance because they were called to do so. Given that the law decrees that the heavenly hosts must receive the pleas of a few human beings, inviting them to intervene before they receive permission to intercede on behalf of humanity. Would men preserve their free will if heaven prevented every undue desire from being fulfilled? However, could the guardians of the human race who see the errors of human acts fail to invoke assistance from the higher intelligence of God on behalf of their wayward brethren, to release life from the crystallized effects of men's erroneous concepts? For the alchemist, prayer has manifold value. Apart from the cited benefits, it gives him the impetus to ennoble his values and to foster the realization of the purpose of divine truth while the mental mold is about to manifest physically. The exclamation of the beloved Jesus in the hour of his greatest trial, "Not my will, but thine, be done," teaches us a more advanced law of alchemy. When the alchemist pronounces it at the moment of sealing the matrix, this call guarantees that the directing forces of power, wisdom, and love will correct the precipitated model where necessary, so that the Creator's most perfect design is produced in the world of form. This places the entire procedure of precipitation in the energy field of eternal perceptions and provides man, as a co-creator with God, the additional benefit of having the assistance of the Almighty as he forms and develops his own pattern of ideas regarding destiny, in accordance with the cosmic objective. In my previous chapter, I have alluded to the possibility that alien minds may interfere in the procedure of precipitation, and although I do not wish anyone to fear such an eventuality, I do wish that each one takes care to protect himself by means of a cautious silence. Measured action and cautious meditation are the additional guarantee that the freedom to create what God wants us all to have will be the destiny for all. The visualization of a blue light around yourselves, your matrix, and your manifestation will help to focus the desired protection. When Jesus Christ declared, "Think not that I am come to bring peace on earth. I came not to bring peace, but a sword," he caused consternation in the many who followed him as the Prince of Peace and continues to cause consternation to this day. My beloved, this statement, together with the following, "I have come to sow discord between a man and his father, between the daughter and her mother, and between the daughter-in-law and her mother-in-law. And man's enemies shall be those who live with him," have the common purpose of conveying a message of protection to every life stream. The Savior proclaimed to all human beings the need to protect the divine design that belongs to them. Therefore, if some were to dare to tell others how they are to live, they would sow discord among themselves, the family and friends. And if man were to choose consciously to seek, find, and follow his own divine design, even when that model is not to the liking of the father, the mother, friends, or society, this man should accept it, even though it places him in discord with those who still retain worldly concepts of achievement. By following the Star of Bethlehem, the internal lodestone of the Christ, one participates in the experience of Gethsemane, of Mount Calvary, of the dawn of resurrection, and of the hill of the ascension. Therefore, no one can have true peace until the sword of divine discrimination enables him to discern his reality, and then protect the inherent gifts and endowments that God has sealed within him, in order to make every life stream a glorious facet of the master plan of creation. I do not allow an excuse for human obstinacy to arise from my previous statement. Without a doubt, it must be borne in mind that many well-meaning parents and friends give sound advice, that many religious and educational leaders do the same, and that much can be learned by appreciating the wisdom of the learned and the educated. However, I am interested in every individual mastering for himself the procedure of self-discrimination, developing the qualities of a leader and the ability to weigh the counsel of others, depending obediently upon God on high to penetrate the density of human reason with the light of his benevolence, which, I repeat, represents the dawn and the substance of pure reason itself. There is no man who has greater logic than the incomparable wisdom of the Word. However, here is a danger point, a precarious state of consciousness in which a senseless withdrawal makes itself felt in the student, and in this state he declares, "I need only God, and only He is to tell me everything I want to know." Now, my beloved ones, when the king invites the son to a banquet, he employs his servants to place the delicacies of his table before the son, who then has to rise and partake of them himself. Therefore, let everyone learn to recognize true worth in others, and in all things without being deceived, however, by the blindness of others. Now I have reached the point where I am anxious to convey to you a great mystery, such that the degree of accuracy with which you learn it will enable you to reap permanent benefits for your mind and your affairs. This is the following. Let the alchemist understand consciousness as the supreme ingredient. My beloved ones, with God all things are possible. For each of you this is true now if you possess his consciousness. In truth, it is immediately possible for you to accomplish all things. If you do not have the instant experience of it, then you need more of his consciousness. You will say to me, so far, so good, but how do I go about acquiring that nebulous something called consciousness? My beloved ones, what is and where is your consciousness? The minute points of physical matter or energy of an atomic nature are composed of particles of light held in orbital paths, predestined and imbued with intelligent action. This spiritual magnetism, animated with creative intelligence, power, and love, is a stream whose density permeates the entire sphere and the realm of every atom, extending to form molecular and cellular compositions, manifesting from there on the planetary scale through the elemental phases of nature, and it will be known, when understood correctly, that these particles revolve in extraordinarily fantastic orbital paths through solar, galactic, and universal densities. Relative size has permitted men the sensation that their consciousness is restricted to the body or to the cell, as the case may be. The concept of the ghost chained to the human machinery is totally erroneous, although the flow of forces of reciprocal influences may become more complex. The concept of a consciousness that expands, simultaneously with the expansion of the universe, must be considered if man wishes to correctly master his affairs. Man is restricted neither to his body, nor to an atom of substance in the body or in the brain, nor are the atoms of physical matter that compose that body restricted to it, nor are they limited in their expression by this body, or by the density of matter and of the mind. The power to extend outward and to become a fully conscious part of the whole in a wonderfully spiritual manner is God's gift to all. In doing so, no one loses anything that is already his, and no one takes anything from another person by sharing the glories of God. The true meaning of the passage of Holy Scripture, in which St. John speaks of the little book that will be sweet in the mouth and bitter in the belly, refers to the assimilation of the idea that he encloses the universe within himself and that he is enclosed in the universe. The book of life mentioned in Revelation is the lexicon of God, and the lexicon of God embraces the whole cosmos. Since it covers all creation, let no one take from another the part or the privilege of enjoying all his cosmic truth. Let no one deprive himself of this supreme privilege of life. To do so represents taking away, either from oneself or from another, his part, and God, who is the law, without a doubt, will restrict the one who does so to the same sphere of limitation to which he restricted the other. Let all, being their brother's keeper, consider the best and highest possibilities for everyone. Therefore, extend and contract your consciousness to perceive not only the necessary inner realm of being, but also the universe that extends outwardly. And you will see how your consciousness will leap into the arms of the eternal alchemist himself. Now, it is not my intention to leave the many subjects contained in this course without a spiritual and physical synopsis, and without an appendix of daily profit. Therefore, the next lesson will include the golden chord, which perhaps should be called a chord, because it is to create in the consciousness the final harmonizing key that will give this course a permanent and inestimable value for all. I include such instruction with the hope that it serves to frame the whole in a singular and beautiful setting. But the whole to which we refer here is your entire life. Master your consciousness, duly directing your attention, thereby possessing the key to the precious storehouse of God's eternal substance. Affectionately, I am Saint Germain. Chapter 9. The Crucible of Being. With soul so dead breathes there the man, who never to himself hath said, "This is my native universe, it is mine." Part 1. If I were to indicate a specific field of application in which students must strive more than in others, it would be that of the expansion of universal consciousness within the individual's energy field. What man needs most now, and I say this unequivocally, is to develop and foster the sense that the universe belongs entirely to the individual. From this derives the inevitable conclusion that the individual must also feel himself as belonging to that universal cosmos thus conceived. As the student of alchemy approaches the temple of being, of life, of unity, he must, if he wishes to correctly learn the meaning of existence and derive happiness therefrom, consider himself as a diamond perfect as the light. set in a mounting of perpetual elegance. When man accepts that he has his origin in those permanent realities that can be perceived and held in the proper focus of progress presumed by the interpretive mind and the heart of being, he renews his course intelligently oriented toward the sublime reality. There is no greater impediment to progress than the isolation derived from a sense of separation from life, in which the littleness of the ego, opposing indefinite odds, lies in wait in the shadows of uncertainty. The unforeseeable events of the future, due to their opacity, offer little comfort to the longing heart that awaits some answer from the creative mind of God and some anticipated perception of the depth of love that God feels for each of the parts that compose the vast whole of the cosmos in all its immensity and grandeur. From the least to the greatest mind on earth, all require the benefit of a lasting attunement with the universal consciousness of God. Due to different religious concepts, men have imagined God as the creator of creatures simply because they themselves are creative creatures. Using the tremendous flow of energy of being, man has diligently imagined and depicted the nature of God, while only a few have perceived the truth that God is consciousness, and as such is life, intelligence, will, and love, which manifest in a rich variety of dimensions and attributes. Now I tell you that God is a benign impersonal personality, a personal impersonality, a personal personality, and an impersonal impersonality that composes the multiple consciousness of being. He gives and gives of his creative self to the creatures he has made with the hope that they understand his purposes and fully emulate his consciousness with which he has endowed them. As they mature and grow throughout life, men imitate one another, copying consciously and unconsciously the personalities that come into contact with their lives. They live in such a sense of unreality that they insist on identifying themselves as vile sinners. Not only do they accept the accusations of the accuser of our brethren, whose machinations are revealed in chapter 12 of Revelation, but also the burden of rising waves of collective condemnation, which, like a raging sea, threaten to drown the real image of the higher self in an ocean of emotions. The purpose of thoughts and feelings is to form a mold of fruitful and progressive experiences that, in turn, endow humanity with the highest attributes of its divine self. Understand, blessed alchemists, that your thoughts and feelings are the lines of collimation that adjust and align your energies, focusing them through the lens of consciousness in accordance with your free will, whether to exteriorize constructive or destructive designs in the world of form. In their prevailing influences, men have abused the energies of their thoughts and feelings, and ignorant of the consequences of their lack of harmony, their mental and emotional irregularities and incongruities, they have molded into asymmetrical forms the energies of light that descend into their worlds, which by their nature can never produce happiness for themselves or for any other part of life. The idea of a temperamental, vengeful, and unjust God is abominable from the beginning. The concept of an arbitrary deity that demonstrates favoritism is equally distressing. Therefore, in accordance with the notion that man has of the deity, he becomes the arbiter of his destiny, and, in accordance with the use he makes of his energies, presages truth or error in his life. The stratification of human consciousness, from the aboriginal to the erudite man of the 20th century, skilled in philosophy, science, religion, and the higher mechanics of living, continues to exist to this day in various parts of the world in all its nuances. Honest individuals will recognize even within themselves these progressive steps of consciousness, which, if progress is made, are in a constant state of alteration. Now, it is true that it may be more comfortable for man, at least temporarily, to vegetate under the sun and under the moon, in an isolated reverie, removed from the tests of life, and without benefiting from the sometimes violent, but always vexing alchemical heat which, like Christ fires, serves to purify humanity of its dross. But I am sure that the soul, desirous of climbing the hill of attainment to reach the highest summits, will neither censure nor reject the necessary chain of experiences that have the object of expanding the mind, sharpening the intellect, ennobling the spirit, and testing the mettle of a man. While we deal with the subject of the gradations of consciousness, remember that each level represents a phase in the alchemy of the transition from the human to the divine. A just sense of the equality of opportunity that all have to become apprentices of the master alchemist is the prerequisite for attaining personal freedom. To recognize the potential of a mobile and malleable consciousness is to recognize the high flight of the spirit, To be willing to accept a personal responsibility to change undesirable conditions within the field of action of being is to accept the responsibility of being a son of God. Those who indulge their ego, allowing energy patterns of personal jealousy to obstruct the entrance to self-mastery while fawning over the achievements of other life streams, will find obstacles placed in their progress along the path until they have transmuted these inclinations. Does envy have in fact its roots in the doubt and fear that Almighty God Himself is incapable of bestowing upon everyone every good and necessary talent that contributes to the fulfillment of His divine plan? Since envy and competition among the individual expressions of God are some of the basic causes of all unhappiness on earth, I would definitely underscore the need that the student has to submit them to the flame. The threat that envy represents for the self-mastery of the alchemist manifests in many useful ways, so subtle that many honest-hearted people are unconscious of the fact that such vitiated vibrations affect their feelings from time to time. The request made in prayer and supplication, or in the form of invocations and affirmations, made in the name of God for the individual to be free from every condition of struggle and conflict, will result in an active and at the same time peaceful progress. Understand that false identification with family and with friends, accepting hereditary or environmental limitations, attachment to people and to places, to one's own race, religion, nationality, or ethnic group must likewise be submitted to the flames of the refiner's fire so they may be transmuted. Personal attitudes must adjust to impersonal laws, and patterns of thoughts and feelings must be molded according to nobler designs, if the individual is to attain true spiritual progress. I do not say that individuals should not be faithful to those they love and in whom they believe, but I affirm that man must be faithful, first of all, to his true self, to his own divine identity and to his Christ self, and then to all those who think like him. Above all, the purposes and uses of life must be correctly understood and practiced. To wake up each day to seek vain pleasure again, and the dubious hope of mortal expectations, signifies a state of flaccid misery in which the soul is scarcely exercised. When the designs of heaven are truly understood, man greets the dawn and welcomes each new day with joy. In the fullness of life, man can hardly fear death. Just as I wrote in my essay of death, it is as natural to die as to be born. And to a little infant, perhaps, the one is as painful as the other. Thus, in our alchemical studies, we have reached the point where we must understand the meaning of the mortification of untransmuted substance. Throughout the centuries, man has felt proud of his body, glorifying and deifying it. Artists have painted it, sculptors have created beautiful statues that display it, and in the end it turned to dust and decay. During that entire process of corruption, the spirit of man has supposedly been creating mansions of eternal perfection in the heavens, which is partly true, because every good deed performed by him during his incarnation is recorded in his favor in the great concentric rings of light and in the electronic substance that compose his causal body, the body of the first cause, which is the dwelling place of the presence of the Most High. Just as each individual, who is a manifestation of God, has a causal body, so also each one has an I Am presence that beats in the center of his body as the sacred fire. And in the energy field of the aura, which surrounds this presence, are found the marks of his good deeds performed in his planetary home. I would like, then, to instill a law in the hearts of students of alchemy. God is absolutely just. The universe is absolutely just. All injustice arises either because man misinterprets and misunderstands the course of events, or because he administers justice poorly. Those who have not correctly understood life, or who remain ignorant of the laws of justice, whether divine or human, cannot be entrusted with the preservation of the flame of justice. As I have mentioned before, every student must be willing to cast off the shackles of false teachers and their false teachings. Every student must resolve to break the chains of error, while rejecting the image of the world as a place where integrity does not exist, and the insinuation that individuals are here to take advantage of one another. As the well-known and frequently quoted showman P.T. Barnum said, "There's a sucker born every minute. Of course, men do not like to think that they have been duped. Therefore, they frequently try to take advantage of their fellow man before he takes advantage of them. Such a way of thinking is the cause of an extremely unhealthy atmosphere in both business and society." While it is true that the world leaders in the different fields of action have the responsibility to set an example of integrity, Nothing should prevent the followers of the world from manifesting that integrity which their leaders ought to manifest, or from exalting virtue as an example for them. Much of what the world thinks of itself is correct, but the mistakes of individuals have been accepted without objection. Such tacit acceptance contributes to creating both a weak civilization and a weak individuality. Therefore, as the bonds of freedom are strengthened throughout the world, a new man must emerge from the social environment. A Neo-Atlantean invested with the righteousness of the sun must appear. A golden man for the golden age. That is the master alchemist. If that spiritual man, invested with the power of the sun, with the power of spiritual alchemy and with the virtue he already possesses, but of which he is very often unaware, is to appear today, it will be because he has offered the body of his corrupt substance to be cast into the crucible of the alchemical furnace. The early Christian mystics and writers referred to this experience when they said that a man must die with Christ if he wishes to live with him. This death of the old man with his deeds is confined to the crucible of alchemical spiritual experience. Therefore, it is possible for all undesirable conditions in a man's life to change so that he may pass through a glorious epoch of transmutation, culminating in the putting on of the new man. Free, at last, from the dross of human experience, he appears in all the resplendent glory of divine experience, which represents the integrity of the resurrection. The agony of Gethsemane may be compared to the spiritual preparation that every alchemist must carry out before submitting himself knowingly and consciously to the crucible of life, in order that he may emerge in the true glory of his being. This is dying with Christ with the certain hope that he is to live again. My beloved ones, bear in mind that those who do not do so willingly and knowingly will, in any case, pass through the change called death, precisely because they insist on following the courses that lead to destruction. This change, however, without having first divested oneself of the old man, will not lead to the indestructible Christhood which God desires every son to manifest. It is a supreme demonstration of faith when a living soul, casting aside even his self-love, offers himself as a living sacrifice, so that the Christ victory may be glorified in him. Such is a son of God by profession. As I conclude Part 1, I advocate that the aspirant make any sacrifice necessary to find the golden possibilities that shine through the mists of time and space in the form of spiritual reality, the hope of every man upon earth. Part 2. My beloved ones, just as heaven is not lost by a single thought or act of a life stream, neither is it gained by a single thought or act. However, your life can become a daily series of victories, in which each step taken correctly impels you to a broader notion of the beauty and glory of the newness of life. This is rising from among the dead works of carnality to the living exaltation of the Christ consciousness of spirituality, which invests those who consecrate themselves to it with the mission of Jesus the Christ, one of the greatest alchemists of all time. Speaking of resurrection, I am reminded of the words, "In the beauty of the lilies Christ was born across the sea, with a glory in his bosom that transfigures you and me, as he died to make men holy. Let us live to make men free, while God is marching on." The newly resurrected man in whom Christ is born, in whom the glory of transfiguration is shown, has risen by the power of change, by the science of divine alchemy. In him, the dawn of each new day acquires a spiritual significance never before experienced. Consider each day as a chalice of opportunities to live in freedom and to set all men free. Then, all nature extends her immortal hands filled with happiness, in sweet communion with the longing of his life stream to fan the fires of freedom. The trees, the flowers, the stones, the earth, all shades of nature's expression, bow before the man who has made himself an instrument of freedom and lend him the care and attention of the master gardener himself. Now it is understood that the Father who created the paradise of God, referred to in Genesis, is in fact the creator of all that is beautiful. The sylphs of the air, the undines of the sea, the flaming salamanders of fire, and the gnomes of the earth are recognized as elemental spirits, created to assist that one Father in fashioning a kingdom of supreme loveliness and beauty. The observant alchemist realizes that the carnal nature of man has been copied in part by the kingdom of nature, given that the elementals, from the smallest to the greatest, are great imitators of the human scene. Since they have adopted human concepts of duality, thorns, thistles, pain, and separation have been reflected upon the screen of life. Even though the discord and inharmony of men have despoiled the virginal beauty of the earth, much of the beautiful has endured, which demonstrates that the power of God is greater than the force of the deification of evil. Through his friendship with those who serve God and man in the natural kingdom, the pious alchemist learns to utilize the great spiritual flow of elemental life, and in the presence of the Holy Spirit he finds cooperation with nature such as he would not have previously imagined existed, even in dreams. As he contemplates the blessed earth, with all the grandeur of her rolling prairies, fertile valleys, and mountain ranges, and as he sees the crystal mirrors of her lakes and mighty rivers weaving through the land, carrying the water element through channels of varying depth, man is filled with reverent wonder. The planetary veins and arteries that conduct the tireless energies of the eternal from one place to another on the spinning globe of the world, the blue dome of the sky, with the golden solar disk that warms and revivifies man, the silent night, with its crystal moon and its diadems of stars, such as the Pleiades. All of this is flooded with a sense of unity that permeates all things. Nowhere is a greater sense of unity perceived than in the depths of the heart of the individual who is in complete harmony with God and with his I Am presence, the individualized identity of the perfection of the Creator himself. This complex of historical errors, which is composed of myriads of carnal deeds and human abuses, is now transformed by the alchemical fires of spiritual regeneration, and in its place appears the integrity of man's real self. He is no longer a part, he is the whole of creation. These valleys and hills, these diadems of stars, and the far-off reaches of space are a component part of him. He is the totality of them, and is in all of them. With that sublime sense of the omnipresent wonder, and as an integral manifestation of God, man is capable of performing the miracles of the great alchemist and converting his world into the marvelous glory of the resurrection. Old sensations die, all becomes new. With this, I desire the students to take a glimpse at the advancements that are to arise in the world of science. In these studies in alchemy, I am interested in offering you a preliminary view of the greater control that man will exercise over the elements, because some of our aspiring alchemists may serve as instruments to produce those new techniques or draw them forth from the universal. Let us consider for a moment the development of the mental switch. At present, lights, elevators, doors, and many appliances are activated by means of switches or electronically, and there are engineers who are working on a typewriter that is to write phonetically the sentences dictated to it. The mental switch is even more revolutionary, for it will allow man to direct mechanical devices and electrical functions by means of brainwaves, mastering the currents of energy that flow through his mind. Of course, many comic situations could be created in which two individuals simultaneously transmit divergent impulses. This would not cause any problem, because they would only eliminate each other, or the stronger of the transmitted mental waves would overcome the weaker one. Another advance of the coming era will be a camera sensitized in such a way that it will permit photographing the human aura. This will help doctors discover the fundamental causes of many physical diseases, and also find the solution to psychiatric problems related to emotions and to subconscious records of past experiences, even past lives, unknown to the patients themselves. The wave patterns, caused by criminal tendencies and by crimes recorded in the etheric body, will likewise be photographed or recorded by means of sensitive instruments in graphic form, similar to the process used now to record brain waves and impulses of the nervous system. With this, the evidence of guilt or innocence will be offered to judicial administrators who previously depended on incomplete knowledge of events when ruling on offenders. When a greater understanding of magnetism is reached, it will be possible to amplify its power in such a way that furniture may be kept suspended in the air without any kind of visible support. A new optical procedure is being developed that will help men increase the exploration of the submicroscopic and atomic worlds. In this field, the amplification of images with great clarity will be possible due to methods previously unknown. With this advancement, the chemists of the world will know certain methods of transmutation, by means of which the synthesis of new elements will be achieved as easily as a child plays with his wooden blocks. A new form of air navigation and transportation will be possible, using an electronic beam projected onto the metal of which the craft is constructed, thus nullifying the influences of gravity upon it and providing it with a property of lightness similar to that of helium. This will allow it to rise and totally resist the force of gravity. Then, the craft may be directed by means of atomic jets, so that everyone will possess a safer form of locomotion. A discovery will not be long in appearing in the sector of color television that will permit greater clarity in the ranges of tones and chromatic values. Through artificial satellites, like those that currently revolve around the Earth, a new method of meteorology and cartography will cause humanity to recognize the need to have a central station to control the weather in order to direct its conditions on most of the land surfaces. I believe, however, that this could be the subject of much controversy and finally be discarded until the moment when there exists greater unity and friendship among the different interest groups and among the nations. The work, initiated many years ago by Luther Burbank, who was acting under the direction of the hierarchy in his experiments with nature and with plant grafting, will reach a new degree of perfection as certain influences existing in the heart of the seeds themselves are revealed through advanced studies of cytology. The heart of the cactus holds a secret, by means of which the arid regions of the earth may come to blossom like the rose and produce all manner of fruits and vegetables with much less moisture than is required at present. Thus, the water shortage will be alleviated. The current growth of the world population, which seems to have motivated many demographers to reconsider and revise the doctrines of Malthus for the purpose of extinguishing or limiting human life, completely contradicting the laws of God, will concern future societies less as they perceive the marvelous methods for increasing agricultural production, harvesting the riches of the sea, and making unlimited use of atomic energy, both in advanced urbanization projects and in interplanetary colonization. There is an objective in God's plans that far transcends the understanding of the human intellect and the historical memory of the earth. The wonders that are to be realized will be dwarfed by others yet greater, and therefore all life must remain in a state of constant expectation. The mind of God rejoices in generously giving his blessing. But above all, students of the light and human beings all, permit me to give you now a piece of advice. First, acquire from God, our Father, the wisdom to live peacefully, to treat one another kindly and courteously, to foster the education of men throughout the world, and, especially, to prevent, by making an honest effort, the increase in the number of the needy who are prone to commit crimes against society. One cannot overestimate the value of duly educating the youth and encouraging them to lead a life of useful service and good character. The political scandals committed in the nations of the world and the cruelty of the methods exercised by totalitarian regimes must collapse under the sword of the Prince of Peace. The Prince of Peace is symbolized by the merciful Christ, who goes forth to teach all nations that the path of God is good, that his wonders are destined to be the use and possession of all and of no one exclusively. A higher way of life than that of vain competition must be pursued. Man must be stimulated by God and not motivated by attaining a social position. Make this truth known. The sharing of celestial grace is a message of the eternal care that the great white brotherhood sends to all who populate the earth. Abundance and peace go hand in hand, and this state of happiness is the will of God. May the planet, by the power of spiritual and natural alchemy, rise to build new homes, new churches, new schools, a new civilization, new concepts, new virtues, new greatness, all linked by the eternal confidence that springs from the very heart of God and is anchored in your physical hearts, like a spark of the expanding flame of the immortal alchemist. Part 3. The feeling of aloneness must be transmuted and replaced by the certainty of the all-oneness. Man emerged from God as a good being and must return to that goodness by becoming like it through the dignity of freedom and choice. The power, love, and wisdom of God are never tyrannical, but tenderly grant to each of the creatures of creation the joy of having the opportunity to know God limitlessly. Forgiveness, mercy, justice, peace, fulfillment, and progress toward maximum supremacy are gifts that life holds for all. Through the process of his descent into matter and form, man, as a part of God destined to finally achieve victory, becomes the conscious master of all he beholds, provided he does not forget his origin. By identifying with the gross, man almost immediately becomes entangled in the mesh of human creation whose snarls, like the thread of Ariadne, weaving themselves into the labyrinthine cavern of subterranean matter, confront him with the minotaur that dwells in the lower octaves of consciousness, waiting to devour the Christ. Escape is freedom. That which descends and submits to form and density must ascend back to the origin from whence it came, in order to obtain its freedom. It is a mistake to do this prematurely, and that is why the Father, or the I Am Presence, knows the day and the hour when each life stream is truly prepared. As long as the totality of the outer circumstance is not transcended and transmuted, so that the life stream fulfills its original purposes for which it entered the Earth's orbit, it must continue its training and preparation in accordance with the universal plan. Thinking individuals will surely recognize quickly that marrying or giving in marriage, procreation, and the perpetuation of the current customs of civilization are not in themselves the supreme objective of life. All the world as a stage does not represent the cosmic Colosseum, and before the curtain falls after the final act, the drama of human existence will be enacted in many corners of the universe, of which neither primitive nor modern man has ever dreamed. What man dreams of heaven is but a sweet glimpse of the images of Elysium, gently provided to mankind as an incentive until such time as he is capable of expanding his own spiritual vision and beholding reality in the wonders of the Father in his many cosmic mansions. The maximum objective that God has projected for every life stream on earth is the very same victory that the beloved Jesus manifested from the hill of Bethany. The emphasis that Christendom places on the agony of Gethsemane, on the crucifixion, and on the vigil in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea has frequently eclipsed the great significance that the glory of the resurrection and the mysteries of the ascension hold for every man, woman, and child. The misunderstanding of the law of cause and effect and the lack of comprehension of the atonement of the universal Christ had their origin in the human concepts that were introduced with the parable of Eden and that subsist in our days, perpetuated by the remote mists of time and dogma. Unfortunately, vicarious atonement has been accepted through ignorance and is fully employed as an excuse to act and continue acting wrongly. Thus, surrounded by an aura of unnecessary fear of God, men have persisted in transmitting fallacies from generation to generation in the name of God and the Holy Scriptures. The inscription of discord and evil deeds upon the four lower bodies of man is effected by scientific law, cosmically ordained, and which in itself is the instrument par excellence of creation. As creators, men have sown the wind and reaped a karmic whirlwind. The victory of the universal Christ that the beloved Jesus demonstrated was destined to indicate to man the path that securely would restore him to the image of God. This path was revealed as the Christ or the divine light within every man who comes into the world. This marvelous light is then the light and the life of the world, of the individual world of every man. Only when man walks in the light, just as he, the universal Christ, is in the light, can he return to the dwelling place of the Father. The forgiveness of sins is a merciful instrument of the great law, by means of which retribution or penalty for evil deeds is suspended, so that a life stream may have the freedom to go and sin no more, and then to receive the opportunity to make greater spiritual progress. However, forgiveness does not absolve the soul of the obligation to expiate the vitiated energies by means of the alchemical fires of transmutation. The reparation of wrongdoings committed against any part of life, including against oneself, must be carried out fully with cosmic precision, therefore. Every jot and tittle of the law must be fulfilled, whether in this life or the next. One need not await this procedure as if it were a dreadful judgment, but rather as a happy expectation of being able to serve life and liberate the imprisoned splendor of life, because by rendering service to it individually and universally, and by invoking the alchemical fires on the altar of being, the individual can annul all disharmony that he has imprudently cast upon his beautiful presence. Truly, those to whom much has been forgiven can love much, because they feel the need to be eternally grateful for the goodness and mercy of God that endure forever. One of the main causes of obstinacy, arrogance, premeditated wrongdoing, disobedience, rebellion, and stubbornness is the vain hope of individual attainment without individual effort or of personal salvation without personal sacrifice. Mankind does not like the idea of conscientiously removing every thread and tangle they have placed in the garment of life or of reaching heaven by making honest efforts. Nevertheless, someday one has to face this truth personally, therefore now, when truth and opportunity-bearing justice are within reach, is the propitious and favorable time. Behold, now is the accepted time. Behold, now is the day of salvation. The desire to find in a master, or in a world savior, a scapegoat for the sins one has committed oneself does not fit with the cosmic principles that are the basis of the law of expiation. A master of great light, such as Jesus the Christ or Gautama Buddha, can hold the balance for millions of souls who are unable to carry the weight of their own sinful feeling. This act of holding is a postponement of the law, whereby, through the mercy and personal sacrifice of one who keeps the flame for all, humanity might find its way back to God, and then, with the power of rebirth and in the presence of the Holy Spirit, return to resume the incomplete enterprise of settling their debts to life. Christ is the Savior of the world because, with his immaculate heart, he postpones the day of judgment and offers humanity another opportunity, in time and space, to fulfill the requirements of immortality. In the holy name of freedom, I cannot refrain from speaking of these subjects, for many have suffered in the astral world after passing through the change called death, and when they appeared before the lords of karma to give an account of their lives, they were found wanting. Unfortunately, this may have occurred only because, while on earth, they accepted false religious doctrines and, in their wayward state, failed to do well during the time allotted to them. Then were fulfilled the words that God spoke to the son of Adam, "Sin lieth at the door." That is to say, the record concerning the abuse of divine energies is something imminent, give an account. In the plan of the world order that God charted, propitiation for sins is permanent and effective, given that the violet flame will transmute every undesirable condition and balance all by means of light. This light is the universal Christ. The precious violet flame, an aspect of the consciousness of the Comforter, is the friend of every alchemist. It is both cup and elixir of life that infallibly produces perfection everywhere as soon as it is called into action. Once the violet flame performs its perfect work, let all cease their efforts, so that God may move upon the waters of creation to produce and sustain the righteousness of his eternal law. The climax or initiation of the ascension can and must come to all, even to little children, when they are prepared for it. When at least 51% of their karma has been balanced, their hearts are just with God and with man, and they aspire to rise to the unfailing light of the eternally ascending presence of God. When your own I Am presence and the karmic council grant this gift to someone, the appearance of old age leaves as quickly as the lips form a smile, and the magnetism and energy of this person become the unlimited power of God flowing vehemently through their being. The dross of his physical body, the fatigue of his emotional body, weary from hatred and its monstrous creations, the ceaseless routine of his mental body, all this vanishes and is replaced with perfect ease by their divine counterparts. The feelings are filled with the love of God and of the angels. The mind is the diamond shining mind of God, omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent. The whole being is inspired and aspiring. Thus, what at one time descended full of hope, now ascends again to the light from which it emerged. In union with the angels and nature, with the friendship of the ascended masters and in the company of the august fraternity of the great white brotherhood, each one of them, by his intrinsic divine merit, attains the fullness of all that God would ever grant to each of his sons, regardless of the person of man. But in the jubilant recognition of the latter's victory, "Thou art my beloved Son. This day have I begotten thee." Epilogue. Religion and spirituality are not a disgrace, but instruments of the eternally creative arts. They are the friends of the alchemist who desires to transform every base element of human nature and of all life into the gold of Christic realization. This teaching contains the keys to the highest portal, and they must be fitted to the lock to give entrance to the supreme initiation. I am the door that leads to the progressive revelation of the ever-ascending planes of consciousness. All this within your beloved God presence. I am. Blessed ones, in alchemy you are not limited merely to extracting three-dimensional objects from the universal light. Alchemy can be mastered in order to illumine the mind, heal any undesirable condition, and spiritually exalt the whole nature of man, from his vile state to the golden standard in which the golden rule reigns. With you, as with God, all things are possible. There is no other higher way. For example, the brilliance of current Soviet science cannot conquer the universe for the blessed children of Mother Russia. Only God can give eternal satisfaction to all the earth. Let the ungodly tremble, for they shall be mown down like grass. But the righteous shall shine as children of the great Alchemist, of God Almighty. There are more studies on alchemy for all who wish to advance progressively in this science of self-mastery. I release part of this material in the lessons for the keepers of the Flame Fraternity, part in the weekly editions of Pearls of Wisdom, written by the masters of our brotherhood, and others I will communicate to you individually in response to the call of your hearts. But you must call if you want this cause, which is just to be fulfilled in you. Call unto me, and I will answer thee, says God the Most High. The Father will reward you openly for every devout prayer you make in secret. In the innermost chamber of your heart, unknown to any man, you can always call in silence. There, within your hearts, is found the crucible of the eternal essence, the white stone, the elixir, and the plenipotency of life. Alchemists of the sacred fire, here is the sacred cosmic formula. Theos equal to God. Rule equal to law, you equal to being. Theos plus rule plus you equal to the law of God acting as the principle in your being. In constant attunement with your true being. Peace be with you. Saint Germain. The end.